Hi everyone! Today I thought to film a little tutorial for you because a few of my subscribers left comments saying that they would love to see a tutorial about how to paint these peonies that I have shown you in one of my last videos, and this was the St. Petersburg White Nights watercolors and this one is the Schminke Horadam. So that is what I will be doing today. I decided to use Schminke Horadam again this time, just because I actually added a few more colors to the palette, and yeah, I just want to try them out as well. So I added a few pinks, and I also got a sap green, which I in one of the videos you might have already seen, I mentioned this. So this is Schminke's sap green. It's not my favorite, but I reckon if I mix it with a few colors I could get it to look the way I like it. So more kind of sort of towards Dr. P.H. Martin's Hydros, or even St. Petersburg White Nights, so a little bit more earthy and organic. So yeah, so what you will need for today, to start off with, you'll need a pencil. I'll use these Tombow pencils, which I have featured in one of the was it the, trying to remember, I think it was an Amazon haul video. And no, was it Amazon? No, it was the Bleed Sea. So if you want to see them, you can check out Bleed Sea, but I haven't taken them out of the package there, so it wouldn't be really useful. But so yeah, I'm going to give them a go today, and I just swatched them, and I think I'm going to use the B pencil because it seems to be more softer than the HB. I'm generally not a fan of the HB pencil because it kind of almost feels sort of scratchy. So I'm going to use the B pencil, and then you're going to need a water brush or any watercolor brush that you like using. I'm not sure if I'm going to use possibly one of my Princeton brushes. Actually I might use, so I haven't made my mind yet up, so we will see. You'll need a jar of water depending on what brush you go for, and obviously some sort of sketchbook or watercolor based paper. This is 270 GSM. I don't recommend too thin paper because we will need to put quite a bit of water onto the paper. And finally you'll need watercolors of your choice. So like I said, I'm going to use my Schminke. I actually need to create a new swatch list because it's got too much information on it, and it's got the wrong order of the watercolors. And also, like I said, I added 6 new colors here at the bottom. So yeah, so I need to swatch all of them out, and I might just see and actually wait until I fill out the other 6, and then I'm going to put them in order possibly and kick out some of those I don't like, and maybe then do a swatch list. I'll see what I do. Anyway, so that's the watercolors I'll be using. Now I'm going to take mine out because if you've been watching my videos, you know that I I'm not too fond of this humongous and impractical palette, so I generally tend to kind of just sort of put it to one side and just use the insert like this, which doesn't take that much space and it's easier for me. And so that is it, so let's start. First time you might want to Google some images and kind of familiarize yourself with a peony shape. Now I have a faux flower on my desk, so just to kind of show you the shape of it. So this is a specific type which has these kind of fluffy center sort of thing, but in essence it's sort of these petals that are kind of interlinked, and if you pick a good angle to draw them from, so I would recommend the easiest one is something like this. So from an angle, then you don't need to draw all these huge number of petals, which can be quite off-putting sometimes. So just concentrate on how they grow. So it tends to be petal here, and next one in, then the other one shifts to the side, one comes out there, one comes. So once you study that basic shape of it, then you should be okay. Okay, so I picked now the brush sizes. So I picked three brushes that I potentially will be using, and that is 1 for detail and 5 and 6 for 5 or 6 probably for the actual painting. So let's go with the 5. So I'm going to prepare my water, and I'll probably zoom out at this point so that you can see what I'm doing, and hopefully that way you can also see enough of the actual technique. So the technique essentially is to, first of all, you need to establish where you want the darkness of the petals. So if we go back to these, you can see that the darkness is at the bottom, and then it kind of goes lighter. And then obviously around the center we're going to create the darkest element, because that's going to be inside the bud, and that's where it's like the shadow is. So, and you can see here with the white lines is what I meant. We're going to avoid those pencil lines by painting just underneath it or above it. So let's do that. And also, just wanted to show you again, where there is a petal curling, you have to then kind of decide what you're going to do, whether you're going to do a lighter or a darker kind of color. And I would do a darker, just because if you start with the dark in the bottom of the petal and you are lightening, and as you're going, there is no point putting a light curling, because it will blend sort of in. You need a little bit of contrast, and therefore I would put darker tone there. So let's start. You also will need tissues, by the way, because that helps a lot with the water control. And I'm going to try keep the tissue on this side so I don't make a mess with the water accidentally. Now, before I start, I'm going to swatch quickly. Do you know, should I swatch it with some paper? Just thinking, because I don't have these swatched over here, so I might just actually use the corner here. that I kind of can remind myself of what's where, I'm going to go in, and I might, just thinking, yeah, I think I'm going to use the crafts mat to mix it. So magenta is the color I used before, so I'm going to use that and put it here, and then I'm going to use the brilliant purple that I just showed you, just to pick that color a little bit more up. So you can choose, so as I was saying, you can start at any petal. So start always where you want the watercolor to be the darkest, and like I said, don't forget to avoid those pencil marks. And let me just zoom in for you. And then I'm going to go into the water, and I'm going to now try and wash it out and make sure there isn't too much water, because what will happen, it just will draw to the bottom. Now with Schminke, keep in mind that although it might look very bright now, it will dry to a much lighter color. Also, I like to leave quite a bit of gaps here and there, just because I think it looks attractive. So here I'm trying to carefully not touch the petals so that the watercolor wouldn't flow into one another, because I want this contrast. So that's that. Now again, I'm going to try and mix up the same color as I just did. When you mix the color, try to do a variation, you know, put a little bit more of one color and a little bit less of the other, and that way you will see that you get this nice variation of colors, and that looks a lot more natural, because there isn't a petal that is the same color, you know, it's about light and everything. So what I've done here, I used the same watercolor, and I basically decided, instead of going back into it, do it straight away and do this curling bit. So I'm leaving a nice little gap and making sure, so I've got my tissue here. It's very important that you have a tissue, because you need to control the water. You want to guide it, the watercolor, and you want to guide it and be the darkest towards the end. And the other thing that I always like doing is dabbing with clean water into the petals. You will see when it dries, it creates that beautiful kind of blooming look. It gives it a little bit more of a texture. So I'm going to go back in, and let's see, I'm going to do this one here. So I'll start just by mapping out the shape. Then I'm really washing out my brush and drying it, so that when I touch it, it won't have that much water, and it will just kind of dilute the color if it goes into there. And then I'm going to do these blooms again. It looks a lot more interesting in places where you actually leave a little bit of that white from the paper rather than completely covering it. So I'm just going to mix up the same thing now, and this time I'm going to I feel bad washing this colour off, but I'm just going to do that real quick. So this time I'm going to do more of the pink, and more of the pink I mean the brilliant, what was it, pink? Look at this now, when they have dried, do you see how much more paler they are? I mean, I have made it quite sort of watery, but still you could see how much more vibrant they were to begin with. Okay, so let's go back to this. So very careful, because there's a lot of watercolor loaded on this brush at this point, as you can see. I'm very careful not to touch the other petal because it's still wet. Now I might just use this color and just go elsewhere, because there is so much of it. I don't want to wash it out and waste it. And I'm going to put it right here. And then I'm going to go back into it without letting it dry too much, because that would create a nice, well, not a nice, it would create a line, which is not something we want. And I'm just going to make sure I drop some of the water. And now I'm going to go back in where you see the watercolor is drying to kind of, you know, flat surface. So over here we're going to basically repeat the same thing and then dab some water in like that. So where you have to watch it, and when it's very wet you won't be able to create contrast. So if I dab this in, it's going to flow into the rest of the watercolor, so you have to wait like here when it's almost dry, and then you can dab it in, because it's not going to travel as fast. The watercolor is not going to be pushed that way. So at the moment it's kind of starting to come together, but it's not very clear yet. So here I can see I created a very pale petal, so I will for sure need to deepen the color, and that's how you do it. So then I'm going to go to the color next to it, which is the permanent carmine. So before that I was using the brilliant purple with magenta. Now I'm taking permanent carmine and mixing it with what was there, and it's more of a kind of warm toned pinky color. So I'm going to do the same thing here. While it's nice and saturated on my brush, I'm going to put the same color there, and I'm going to actually wait a little bit because it just moves way too fast. So I'm going to wait for it to dry, and then I'm going to go back into it and pull it out. So you can see how much a color changes just by controlling the water, adding it a little bit or taking it a bit out. So that was exactly the same color mix, but a little bit more diluted, and it's a completely different thing. So here you can see it needs to be deepened. I'm going to go back in. So it's a constant process of mixing colors and going back in, mixing a little bit of that color, mixing a little bit of this color, and it's sort of starting now to become quite appealing. Now I just touched this color slightly, the red, and it's probably going to go in and just flow in. So sometimes that can be a pleasant accident and quite flattering, and sometimes not. Now watch this. So the watercolor has dried off a little bit, but I'm pulling it out, pulling it down, and then I'm going to wait further and go back to it. So at this stage I'm going to go back into the Brilliant Pink. It's a lovely colour, by the way. Obviously you won't be able to hang it on your wall if your wall is in bright sunshine, because I don't remember if I said, but it's got a fluorescent pigment, and all that means is that it's not going to be light fast. So I'm just pulling out watercolour here. That was a nice little area here. You can see barely any water. Oh gosh, I didn't get to see that. Okay, I think I'm going to zoom out slightly just because it's out of frame. So here there was barely any water, so I'm going to do this again. I'm washing out my brush, making sure it's nice and dry, and then pulling it out, and you can see there's a nice light area and it's not moving further. Then I'm going to go back into the darker colour, and again not touching anything here. I'm just going to create that curled petal kind of look. Trust me, it all works. Once it dries, your eye starts to interpret it that way. You might think, oh my gosh, how is that looking like a curled petal? So I've done here this accident again. It just moved. But it does work. Your eye starts to think, you know, you're kind of tricking your eye to think that that is what it is. I'm going to go back in and dab in some water in areas where I think I want to create a little bit more texture, break it down a little, and yeah. Also what that does, it pushes the watercolor to the edge and it creates that nice crisp edge. So I'm going to go back into that lovely permanent carmine, because you can see this petal was very pretty and I want to repeat that color elsewhere. And in fact I think I'm going to repeat it not far off, so I'm going to do it over here. And do the same thing with the curled petal. And I'm going to let it sit now and see where else I want that. I think here that would look nice. So where you have very big gaps, make sure you go in and kind of correct them a little bit while you still can do that, while you have these lovely watercolors going. So I'm going to do that over here, and that looks better now. So okay, I'm going to try create what I've done in this petal, which I quite like. So I'm washing out my brush and then dabbing it off, dabbing most of the water on the tissue, and having a barely wet brush, I'm just touching the corners like this, and then washing it off again, and that's going to hopefully create a very pale edge. I'm going to wait slightly here. Okay, so that's quite pretty now. And then I'm going to take this water and blob it onto there. Okay, and I'm going to go back into the Brilliant Purple, and I'm just checking that everything is in frame still. It's quite therapeutic painting these peonies. I actually done 3 paintings on rough watercolor paint and it looks really lovely. I have done them for my bedroom, so they're kind of hanging above the bed, above the headboard, and it looks quite nice. I do like that sort of look. So it's very easy. You can just buy like a, you know, cheap sort of or affordable frame from IKEA and do your own art, which is super calming and, you know, indulgent. And then hang it on your wall and enjoy looking at it.